Okay, so today we talked about the Bordo essay and the Lutz essay. So those were the two quizzes that we had due today. So we had a discussion on those two essays. And then I kind of picked up where I left off on Friday with paragraph development and writing a well structured paragraph. So let me just show you here a couple things. So on Friday afternoon, I posted a 12-minute video that goes over some of what my past students have written about in terms of so what for the ad analysis paper. So I would recommend watching that video. And then in terms of like announcements, so a couple things to keep in mind that for Wednesday, so that's not tomorrow, but the next day, please bring, excuse me, please bring your ad with you. So whichever ad that you want to write about, bring that with you. And then we also have an essay over the Miller reading. So that's in your RPC. Just look at the syllabus for that. And then a week from Wednesday, the 10th, we do not have class. That's the day that we'll do the peer review outside of class. So just keep that in mind. No class Wednesday, the 10th. And then this Friday, I'll be going over quoting and paraphrasing, or actually, no, just quoting. So it's definitely a good day to make sure that you're in class. If obviously if you're not sick or anything, but let's see. And then, so I'm gonna send you a link to a commercial that the Miller essay is based on. So just make sure that you watch that commercial. We don't have a quiz or anything over that Miller essay, but one of the things that I mentioned in class is that reading that or watching the commercial first makes that essay really easy, a lot easier to understand. So make sure that you do that. But let's just kind of jump back into where or what kind of I talked about today in class. So let's see here. Okay, so last time we talked about thesis statements and what makes a good thesis. And today we just sort of picked up with how do we write cohesive paragraphs and this issue of making sure that we only have one topic per paragraph so that we're not trying to take on too much in a paragraph. And so one thing that I reminded people today of on the board is that we have, we have graphics, audience, and language, right? Or text on the ad. But the order that you present those is up to you. And your book talks about building and importance. So you want to save whichever one you feel carries the most weight until last. And put those in an order that you feel makes the most sense for you and your paper. Okay, they don't have to go in the same order that I present them in the prompt. Okay. I kind of talked about topic sentences already, and I'm going to talk more about them Wednesday. But one of the things that I that I emphasized in class today is, understanding that your first draft is not supposed to be perfect, and it might not even have things like topic sentences or transitions at all, and that's okay. And okay, a lot of this is kind of redundant actually, but so after your introduction, so you're gonna have your introduction with a hook, right, at the beginning that gets your reader's attention. Then you're going to have, kind of gradually bring in advertisements and then end with your thesis, right? So that's your introduction. After your introduction, it helps to have a background paragraph where all you do in that paragraph is describe for me what your ad looks like. So you don't have to get into any argument or analysis of it. You just lay it out for me. What does it look like, so that you've got that background done. And then after that, then you can get into either graphics, language, or audience. Okay. So that's what I would do. I would have a background paragraph right after the intro that just explains what it looks like. What does it say? Who's on the ad? Whatever, right? And then I talked about making sure that you don't write how you think. And that mostly just comes down to making sure that you don't sort of get off topic, or that you don't go off on a tangent. This happens when we wait till the last minute to write a paper, and then all of a sudden it just feels like we're taking up space. But with this essay, because you have so many drafts, that doesn't really happen very often. And then I gave the tip in class of writing out your thesis statement on like a sticky note, and then putting it at the top of your, oops, I just covered my camera, I think, sorry. Putting it at the top of your laptop, so that as you're writing, you can always go back and ask yourself, okay, how does this point affirm my thesis statement? How can I better sharpen what I'm trying to say so that it does affirm the thesis? You want to make sure that you're transitioning not just within a paragraph, but between paragraphs. So in class today, I mentioned how you want to put your transitions at the end of each paragraph as opposed to putting them in the topic sentences. So in terms of how do you transition, well, you want to avoid having every transition say another way or in addition to, and instead really work on asking yourself, well, how are these two topics related, and how can I make a transition that feels more organic or efficient rather than just relying on that another way. That's not to say you can't use it at all, but it will help. And then so we also spent some time just chatting about conclusions, and we talked about maybe what worked well in the past and what didn't. And the gist of it is that in the past, you might have been taught that a conclusion should summarize your essay, right? I was always taught that. But in academic writing, we want to try to move away from that and instead focus more on why it matters. So think about your conclusion as really emphasizing that big picture. And so you might also think about that in terms of so what. So that 12-minute video that I posted on D2L on so what, that should help you with the conclusion too, just to kind of give you some examples. But the key with the conclusion is just making sure that you're not summarizing, and that you're talking more about why it matters. And so if our introduction is broad and then gets narrow, you want to think about your conclusion as being narrow, but then getting broad. Okay. So you start your conclusion by talking about your ad, but then by the time, you get through a few sentences, then you start to expand and you start to talk more about the ramifications or the consequences of not just your ad, but like that line of thinking and those values or those points of views, those dominant cultural traits that your ad is really perpetuating. That's what your conclusion should do. So it expands as you kind of go through it. And then one thing someone asked me in class was if it's okay to restate your thesis word for word. I would say that you probably should avoid it, just because there's probably a more creative way that you could restate it rather than just copying and pasting what your reader has already read. So I wouldn't repeat anything like word for word. And then we also talked about just some overall tips for introductory paragraphs. So let me pull that up here. So for introductions, you never want to apologize for your writing. You never want to say like, in my opinion, or I'm not sure. Instead, you want to say things like I argue or I believe. This second one, it kind of depends. So, I think like with longer papers or projects, you might do this. In this project, we will look at blah blah blah. But for paper of this size, you don't really need that. This one you always want to avoid. It doesn't matter what kind of paper you're writing. If it's an academic college level essay, don't use the dictionary. Just find a better source. It's kind of just trite to do that. And then we also talked about even when you write, your hook that grabs your reader's attention, you still want to get to the point, right? You don't want it to be too long-winded. You want to say it and then move into your essay from there. And a few other kind of just things to watch out for. So, making sure that you keep that formal academic tone and that you avoid phrases like all people or everyone. And then looking out for cliches. So, cliches are those worn out phrases that we say when we can't really find the words to say what we mean. And so in academic writing, we want to always vary or always favor what's specific over what's general. So don't use cliches. If you have to stop and ask yourself if something is a cliche, it probably is one. So just really work on deleting those cliches and writing more specifically. Then I'll show you what we looked at for Bordo and Lutz. So we'll pull this up here. Wasn't a quiz or anything. I just wanted to go over some of these. So we talked about how Bordeaux says in her essay that we have to think about the body not just as like the physical, biological body, but also what over time our culture, our society has imprinted on it. And that when we look at other bodies, whether it's in a magazine or if it's face to face or if it's ourselves, we always see judgments and values and beliefs based on what the culture at the time has imprinted. So, someone in class gave the example of in Asia, the culture favors or values clear, pale, like pasty, almost like porcelain skin. Whereas in America, we have a huge industry of tanning beds and self tanners and what do you call it? Contouring, those types of products that give us totally different look. And so, whether we know it or not, that's all a product of our culture. She uses the jockey ad to make an argument about the different states of undress between the male and the female body. And so she talks about how this kind of goes to the next one, but she talks about how the female bodies, because of what our culture has imprinted about what it means to see a woman in that state of undress, that the females, even though they look playful and happy, that there's a sense of vulnerability to it. And she even goes so far as comparing it to evoking images of rape that we don't get with the male figures, right? At the arms crossed and the very utilitarian dress. They look like they're ready to go to work, etc. And then she also made the point that part of why we interpret it that way is that when we see movies or TV shows, we very often we see like a man take off his shirt to go get ready for work, but when a woman is getting undressed, it's like a sexual nature. It's something that's sexual or sexualized, right? And then, so on 112, she addresses a naysayer where she says she acknowledges that you might disagree with what she's arguing about the ad, but she talks about how because our cultural imprints and our cultural values are always evolving, that it's never really constant, that what you see and what I see will always be changing. So that's sort of her naysayer. And then looking at weasel words, so just like how um, a weasel, sucks out the inside, and then it looks it looks whole. It looks intact. The words that advertisers use to try to sell us their products are actually hollow, right? The core has been sucked out of those words where they don't really mean what they think they do. And someone in class today made the point that ads in general work the same way, right? We see something, it looks to be intact, but if we look deeper, if we look closer, ads are really just hollow, right? They're not really selling us products, they're selling us values and ideas and promises and beliefs that our society promotes. Okay, so just some kind of key page numbers or key examples here to keep in mind. So this one, so if you have for this paper an advertisement that uses things like helps, prevents, or helps stop, or helps overcome, helps eliminate. So let's make the point that we get so caught up in the word that comes after it, like eliminate or stop or overcome, that we don't realize that helping prevent cavities isn't the same as actually preventing them, right? And then virtually is another weasel word we see a lot, especially like cleaning products will do this. He gives the example of the birth control pill that basically said it was a lawsuit that basically said that the company was acknowledging that virtually effective means not effective, and virtually trouble free means that it's not in fact trouble free at all, right? And then, so new and improved, Lutz mentions how, it's a good thing that new is regulated, but the problem with that is that the regulation on what is considered new can be so slight that it's kind of inconsequential, right? It's like, you could change the product, the corporation could change like the color, they could change something in the packaging, and now all of a sudden it's new and improved, right? And but we see it and we automatically think, oh, that must be better, when in reality that's not the case. And then acts fast, works fast, these are empty or unfinished phrases that we have to finish on our own. I kind of liked this point that he makes on 130. So he uses, an ad, and I've had students write about this before, that maybe try to sell you something that looks exotic or that looks like a vacation type of place. And it's not so much that the advertisers think that we're that naive that we think, just because we buy this coffee creamer, we're going to go on vacation. It's not that, but it's rather the emotions that those types of images evoke in us, right? Those pleasant sensations, those romantic type of thoughts that then we associate with the product. And then, so unfinished claims, we see this a lot. Longer, faster, stronger than what, right? The advertiser doesn't say. And so the problem with that is that it's left to the reader or the viewer to fill in the blanks. And those blanks are often filled in with, like we just talked about, everything that the culture imposes on us to believe as being, good or bad or beautiful or ugly or helpful versus not, or success versus failure, etc. Okay? So those unfinished words. And then the last sort of like housekeeping thing I said today was just make sure that to schedule an appointment with me at any time if you want some extra help. Also, the Writing Center is a great resource to take advantage of. They are all remote, so Zoom or email appointments for that. And those instructions are on the syllabus. That is all that I have. So thank you for your diligence in protecting those around you and not coming to class if you're sick. So hopefully this has been helpful, and I hope to talk to you soon. Bye.